Hey there, Erin here. We're going to do a quick tutorial on how to lengthen or shorten the Madison pattern. So let's go inside the pattern. All right, laying out your pattern, I am starting on the front piece, even though it is flipped to the wrong side, but the same principle applies. So you'll want to grab a ruler and you're going to choose the marking at that waistline notch. And you're going to draw a line that is perpendicular to the grain line using your ruler. Now I'm giving it a try here with my pen, and I'm going to make this a little darker for you guys so you can see it on camera. But for you, I would like for you to use a pencil so that you can erase or just make a different line if you're not happy with it. But just make sure that it's as close to perpendicular to that grain line as possible. Next, I'm going to make another cut line at the hip area that's around the last inch and a half of that grain line. So right above the bottom of that arrow, it's about an inch and a half from there. And again, you're going to make a straight line perpendicular to the grain line as best as you possibly can. Now, as you're lining up your ruler, you'll want to make sure that the second line that you draw around the hip area is parallel to the one that you drew at the waist area, which is why it's important to use a pencil or something that's not too permanent, because you want to be adjusting this line to make sure that it's as straight as possible. So again, parallel to the waistline line, cutting line, but perpendicular to the grain line. Now you'll want to make a note of the distance between those two cut lines that you just drew, because you are going to apply that same distance to your other pattern pieces. For me, that distance was about 12 and a quarter inches. Now you're going to cut at those lines, and this is where you're going to lengthen and shorten your pattern. So now that you've added your own waist and hip line measurements, you'll want to take note of how much you want to lengthen or shorten at those points accordingly. And then I'm going to show you how to do that. So now I'm deciding to finally flip my pattern to the right side, so it's not upside down. But starting with the top two pieces, if you'd like to shorten your pattern, you simply overlay your pattern pieces, making sure that those grain lines are aligned. And then you're going to shave off the excess there. And then you're going to soften that curve a little bit at the waistline. If you want to lengthen, you're going to extend those pattern pieces by the desired length, and making sure that, again, that those grain lines are still aligned. And then you're still going to true up that pattern by making that curve align to those cut pieces. This is also another opportunity to soften that drape if you'd like, depending on how you decide to true up the pattern. And just as the same with shortening, you'll want to make sure you've got that waistline curved a bit more. So we're going to move on to the bottom section, and the same principle applies. You're going to make sure that the grain line is aligned, and you're either going to overlay the pieces to shorten them and true up that pattern piece on the side. To keep that sharp cascade waterfall flow, you'll want to shave off the excess in the middle when you're truing up. And you're going to, again, just true up the side of the side seam. If you want to lengthen, same principle, just extend it, making sure that that grain line is your North Star at all times, and true up the pattern at the side seam and the front seam. So now let's apply this technique. I'm going to shorten my pattern. So just grab your tape and overlay your pieces by the desired amount. I'm taking off about 2 inches at the waist and about 1.5 inches at the bottom. So I'm overlaying my top pattern pieces by 2 inches, making sure that that grain line is perpendicular and taping into place. And I'm going to overlay my bottom pattern piece by 1.5 inches. Now grab your pencil. I'm grabbing a pen just for visibility on camera, and you'll want to practice and eyeball how you want to true up your pattern. Now I can choose to add the excess that is flowing from the top pattern piece, or I can shave off the excess that's flowing from the bottom of the pattern to give it more of a dramatic waterfall look. If you add the excess, you will then create, you still have that waterfall flow, but it'll just be a little bit softer. And so please don't do what I did and use a Sharpie on your cutting table. How about that? And you're going to eyeball this, or you can use a curve ruler if you would like. I did not, but I'm just showing you what it's like to eyeball and why it's important to use a pencil. Now I'm noticing here to really give it that smooth curve, I need a little more paper. So I'm just going to grab some tissue paper that's left over when I cut out my pattern, and I'm going to tape it to the bottom. So I've got some paper to draw on here. And so as you are playing around with how you want to true it up, you can change your mind to whatever is easiest for you. Again, it'll just have slight effects, just probably barely noticeable on how you want to true it up. If you want to add excess or if you want to shave off a bit. But using a pencil helps you kind of play with that. But now I've got enough paper to create a smoother line. That'll be my new cutting line. And once you're happy, you just cut on that new cutting line. And then we're going to do the same thing on the side seam. So grabbing an extra piece of paper, I'm going to give myself some more room to true up that seam, taping it down to the side, and grabbing my Sharpie here to soften that curve at the waistline. And once I'm happy with that, cut it out, and we're done with this pattern piece. Now moving on to the remaining pieces, I'm using the back right now, and for the back that has 2 notches, I like to place my waist shortening line or lengthening line in between those 2 notches. And then the rest of the technique applies the same. You'll want to draw your hip line measurement the same distance from the waistline marking as you did on the front piece, just so you keep your lengthening and shortening locations on the pattern consistent. So again, same principles apply. Draw your lengthen, shorten lines, cut them out. You'll want to use the same shortening or lengthening amounts as you did on the front to keep everything consistent. And since we don't have a grain line on this pattern, we're going to make sure that we are parallel to the fold line. And then we're going to true up that side seam. And then we move on. And you just continue to work on the side back piece in the same fashion. And here I'm just using my scissors to shave off the excess, and then I pull out my rotary cutter just to get a little bit more precise and smooth out that hump a little bit more. And rinse and repeat on the side back piece. Marking out, making sure things are aligned and parallel, consistent, cutting it out, taping it together, and truing up those seams. And that's it. Now you've got your pattern pieces shortened or lengthened to your liking. Now it's time to do the easy part. Just cut and sew your Madison cardigan. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. And if you haven't purchased the Madison pattern, I will leave that link below this video.